hear music when I look at you.
Getting into the big album, talking about your
Me
life and
too.
music. So yeah, thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the call. I was so thrilled to hear from you.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed the album. It's always so good to have new debut albums out in the jazz world. So let's get into it. I want to begin
Thank
with this.
you.
6 years ago, looking at March now, with 6 years ago with the COVID pandemic happening, it's like all these little flashbacks are happening. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you approach things today?
That's such a great question. Thank you. That was, I mean, as for all of us, it was really difficult, and especially as a musician, like incredibly difficult to not be able to make music with other people for such a long time. During COVID, I actually had this series called Jazz on the Porch. So I was living with my family for part of COVID, and we live on this beautiful little cul-de-sac. And so we would invite our neighbors and friends to come and bring their lawn chairs, and people would set up outside, and then I would give concerts from the porch. So that was one way that I was able to just kind of keep my sanity and still be able to perform because that the reason that I do this is is the people and the audiences that I get to meet and the musicians I get to play with and just like sharing music in person with people, which is an art that I think has been largely lost, was certainly lost during COVID, and hasn't come back completely since. So I always love to promote live music and seeking out opportunities to see and make live music whenever we can. Yeah, so that was one of the ways, and that has certainly informed my artistry since then. And just prioritizing, my relationships with my band and taking every opportunity that we have to play, regardless of, where it's at. I just want to play. I just want to make music.
Absolutely. So talk to me about the Sweetest Sounds. What was the vision? How does it feel? Kind of give me an overall feeling.
Sure. So, kind of going off of that experience, the Sweetest Sounds, my vision for it, first and foremost, was to feel like a live performance in an intimate space. Those were like the two words that I use most often, live and intimate. And my sound engineer, Sam Fishkin, was brilliant, and he like really took that and ran with it. We recorded it at Transient Sounds here in Chicago, which was a perfect studio because we had just enough isolation to make it, viable to be able to, mix and kind of play with things, but it is performed in its entirety live. We did not like overdub or do any of that post production. And that was by design. I wanted it to feel live and have the imperfections of a live performance and the breath and the life that comes with that. So that was my sonic overarching goal. But also to bring to life songs that I love and that speak to me, especially lyrically. Like I think all of the songs on this record are so beautifully written from just a textual standpoint. So I really gravitated towards those. And then, as you heard, I did a duet with each one of my band members.
Yeah.
And so that was a really special part of it too, because this is my working band. It wasn't like a band that got together at the studio on the day of. No shade on records that are made like that. They're brilliant. But I just was really proud and glad to be able to make this record with my actual working band, these friends and collaborators that I have such rich relationships with. And so I really wanted to kind of put those on the forefront and have this, little individual moment with each member of my band.
So talk to me a little bit about what you're hoping the listener gets from this album.
Yeah, I hope that it takes them on a journey and I don't want to tell people what to get from it, but
Yeah.
I hope that people go in with an open mind about what jazz is, right? Because, I think that there is a tendency to try to put jazz in a box or put it in a museum, and it certainly is not. It is a living, evolving art form. And I drew from a lot of influences, both jazz and not jazz, right? In the academic terms, both jazz and not jazz influences. And but yet it all is, right? It's the spirit of improvisatory music and taking a lyric and finding, a way to arrange it so that it becomes new again, right? That's what jazz musicians have been doing forever, is taking like old Broadway show tunes and making them hip, and finding new ways to bring the music to life. So that was the spirit with which I approached the record. And if I were to give like one through line of the record, it would be the Sweetest Sounds. Like it's my debut, and to me that song is not only about like finding love, it's about the creative act and about, getting out of one's own way to bring the sweetest sounds that are inside of us to the world. There are so many reasons not to make something. And oftentimes in the current environment, it feels like a shout into the void. But I think now more than ever, art is resistance. Joy is resistance. There are all these important things that we need to keep doing, even if it feels futile, to continue to create. And so this record for me was about bringing the sweetest sounds that have been living inside of me for my whole life, to a record and sharing it with the world.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because at the end of the day, we're living in a very scary time in America with war,
Yeah,
on foreign soil and against immigrants in this country and everything that is trying to be normalized, but it's not okay. And I think
absolutely.
artists play a very specific role in giving the audience and even themselves a level of solace, a level of feeling connected to something that we know to be inherently good. So, how much of that is a part of what you're doing, either in the recording studio or on live stages? How much of that is in your brain when you're doing that?
Oh, so I mean, so much of it. I think that in the age of AI, we're seeing, I mean, even just this week, we saw this huge outpouring of AI generated music on Spotify. I don't know if you've been following this, but there was like a lot of Spotify music released under real artist names that was AI generated, had nothing to do with the artist. And so I think bringing that level of humanity to my music was really important. Again, I recorded it live, in the studio, but it was a live performance. Because I think in all aspects of life, we're losing our humanity, whether it be politically or from a tech perspective. Like there are all of these little parts of our daily life that are being stripped of our humanness. And so I find that incredibly important. And again, like I love performing live for people and hearing their stories. And like I was at the Jazz Showcase the other night, which is a phenomenal club here in Chicago. It's been here forever. I mean, there's a big picture of Charlie Parker and he played there, and like everyone has played there. And I'm honored that I get to play there. But this family came up to me after the show, and they had just come from a funeral, and the Jazz Showcase was their father's favorite spot to hang out. And so that they chose to go there after the funeral. And like those sorts of interactions with real people experiencing real things is why I do it. Like, they could have come into the showcase and seen anyone, but I was so grateful that it was me, and that hopefully like my music was able to heal them in some way or just give them some sort of joy on a really difficult day.
Yeah.
So I do it for the people, for the humanity of it, and trying to preserve that in every way that we can.
So, are you originally from Chicago?
Yeah, I've grown up here since I was 4. I mean,
Okay.
I was not born here, but I was certainly raised here and raised by the city and raised by this music.
So you have a diverse portfolio of occupations. You're a singer, you're a Second City alum, you're a conductor, you've done musical direction. So take me
Yeah.
back to the beginnings. Why did art, why did music, why did the stage, why did that appeal to you? And was it always going to be that?
It was always going to be that,
Yeah.
certainly. Yeah, I mean, I started singing before I could speak. My grandfather was a really prolific jazz pianist and vocalist in Detroit, Jerry Libby, and he used to come visit when I was a little kid, and my mom tells the story of how he would like sit by my baby monitor, and while I was supposed to be sleeping, I would be singing instead, even before I, could speak. And so I think that is very indicative of like who I was. I just had music in me. You know, I came from this musical background from him. My mother was a classical pianist. So I was just like surrounded by music every day. I started studying the piano when I was 4 years old. And it's always felt a part of me. And I love performing. I love being on stage. In any capacity. And so that's been kind of my guiding light is that I work, I perform, you know, every time I've had an opportunity to do that, I've taken it. And so that has led me to a lot of really interesting places. You know, I've loved music directing here in Chicago. We have such a vibrant theater scene,
Mhm.
both equity and non-equity, right? We have this like really thriving storefront scene which is just like small, intimate theater, which I find is more similar to jazz than it is to like a Broadway show in a huge house because it's really up close and intimate. And I also co-founded a theater company and I act with them and we do the same, you know, this type of theater that Chicago is known for, which is it's filled with like this experimental, not in a way that is off-putting or, you know, experimental for experimental's sake, but it's really just about playfulness and like pushing the boundaries, which are the same things that attracted me to jazz, right? I started playing jazz when I was about 10 years old. And so all of these things feed each other. You know, I was never a kid to like be put in a box. I was not ever going to just do one thing. And I just feel really grateful that my life is so filled with art, and that I'm able to kind of feed my artistic spirit via, you know, singing and playing the piano on stage and also acting on stage and also, you know, the occasional conducting gig. And I'm so grateful for that.
So, who were early influences when you were thinking about getting into the music world? Who did you look up to?
Yeah, I mean, certainly my grandfather. I actually have his records. I've been working on a project where I had his first record digitally remastered. And so that will be coming out soon, probably after my release. And yeah, so I listened to him a bunch. I listened a lot to, you know, classic jazz vocalists. Nancy Wilson was a huge influence. I think people can kind of hear that in my voice because I transcribed her a lot. Chet Baker Sings was the first record that I ever learned like every lyric and note to. I learned all of his solos in that. I also like love Sarah Vaughan and Nina Simone and just I don't know. I was surrounded by like really great music, Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans. Yeah, I was never like listening to pop as a kid. I had an iPod full of jazz records.
So, what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
Mm. I think it was I only got to see my grandfather play one
Okay.
time, and
Yeah.
that really like changed something in me. I saw the energy, the aliveness of the music on stage and the communication, just this incredible nonverbal communication that you see with a really tight band and with really great musicians who can just like give each other a look and know where it's going, you know, harmonically or rhythmically or whatever. And that was something that captivated me because it felt like magic. And
Yeah.
so I have been really lucky to be raised by this vibrant jazz scene here in Chicago and have, you know, only recently started to discover that magic for myself. And it is really special to have band members, bandmates that you've played with for a long time and have that really like close connection with on stage where you don't need to say anything.
Yeah.
And I find that with each of my band members on this record that we have that kind of relationship, and I'm really thankful for that.
So the thing about seeing your grandfather play is that you're coming from this place of dreams. You're watching him live his dream, but you also incubated this dream, and now
Yeah.
you're living it. What's
Yeah.
been the difference between what you thought your life was going to be like as a musician, as a performer, and what it's actually like to do it? What's that space in between?
Oh, what a great question. I think that I think that being a jazz musician has a very different meaning now than it maybe did then. there was like a negative, kind of a negative connotation around jazz musicians, as you know, from that era. And it was seen as kind of like I don't think that my family ever held this belief, but I think that it was seen as like kind of a second tier art form.
Right.
And now it's not. You know, we have jazz in Carnegie Hall, we have jazz at Symphony Center. Like it has reached the level of fine art finally, you know. Even though it always has been, like it's getting a different type of cultural respect. And so I think that that's been something that I've really appreciated is that my friends from classical music, my friends from theater, jazz is a place that is really uniting for everyone. And
Right.
so I will have a show and be joined by my friends from all of these different circles and people that I don't know. And there's just something that is universal about it that I think is really beautiful, and I'm really grateful that that is finally being recognized by the art world as what it is. You know, it's not a second class music. We're not second class musicians, and it's I know we shouldn't use second class.
I
I
get
don't
what
mean
you're
that, but
saying.
it was kind of a it was not deemed to be a fine art,
Yeah.
and it is, and so I'm grateful that I grew up in a city and in a time that recognized it as that and that holds up its musicians as proudly as I feel about my jazz lineage and about all of the jazz musicians who paved the way for where I'm at.
And another part of dreaming about this career is that you think about the stages, these hallowed venues in cities, like in
Yeah.
Chicago with the Green Mill and, Carnegie Hall in New York and all these places. What was the first stage that you played on where you were like, wow, I'm here, I'm on this stage? Have you had that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky to get to play at a bunch of clubs in Chicago at a really young age that have that sort of energy. But also like this past summer, I got to play on the same stage, on the same piano, on the same festival as Diana Krall, who's a
Wow.
huge influence of mine. So that I think was maybe one of those moments even more because I was like I was really blessed to grow up on these stages, on these hallowed spaces. But I think be like so closely following my musical hero and being billed on the same festival as her was really special for me this summer and kind of sparked some reflection about how far I've come, you know.
Yeah.
I don't often sit and think about, you know, where I'm at and how what successes I've had. I'm a very driven, forward focused person, so I don't
Yeah.
often do that. But that was a moment where I sat and thought about what has led me here and how grateful I am.
So speaking of being where you're at now as an artist, what do you like the best about being a musician, about being in this jazz community? What do you look forward to every day as your career continues to evolve?
Yeah, I look forward to the music. Something I love about this career is that the music is never the same. You know, it's a lot like I think good theater is that it's never the same show night to night. And so I'm really looking forward to like taking this record on the road and seeing how it evolves night to night and how the music changes and what new little gems we find in it. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to making more relationships with more fans and friends and audience members in different cities because I haven't had a lot of opportunities to do that. And so, yeah, I'm excited to share the music more widely than it's been shared before.
So, why do you love this art form we call jazz?
Oh God, that's such a great question and such a hard one to answer
Mm-hmm.
because it's I think it's a way of viewing the world. I
Mm-hmm.
know it sounds very esoteric, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lifestyle of viewing the world as a place of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you are given very little. right? From a musical standpoint. You're given a recording or a lead sheet, and you've got, the melody and some changes. Everything else is spur of the moment. It's improvised. It requires a state of flow, to be done well. You need to be in communion with your instrument, with your band members. And I find it to be very meditative, when you're in that space and just communicating freely. If you're doing it right and have practiced and trained and you're lucky enough to get there on that night and get out of your own head, it's really magical because you think something and it comes out, right? You think a line or you sing a line. I'm often, if my mic is turned on while I'm soloing, you can like hear me singing the lines that I'm singing. It's an extension of my voice, my piano is. And yeah, so I would just say it's an openness to possibility, to what this can become, and not dictating what it shall be, but discovering it together with people that you love and trust, because it requires a huge level of trust to get up on stage and say, "Hey, we don't know everything that's going to happen, but we have each other, and we're going to figure it out, and it's going to be great. It's going to be beautiful, and it's never going to happen again." And it's the same spirit that I try to bring to my work as an actor.
Yep.
We have the text, but we've not memorized how we're going to say the text, or at least I don't. And so every night you're in response, you are in relation with your scene partner, with your band, and discovering what is really there, not putting on a preconception of what you think it should be, but allowing it to be what it is, and to discover it along the way.
So let's say you get into a time machine and you can go back in time and see one jazz show. Where are you going?
Nina Simone live at Montreux, 1976.
Okay, you had it right off the top of your head. Nice.
I've watched that video so many times, and I would just have loved to be there.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, everyone you work with on the bandstand and on the stage, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
You've got such great questions,
Thank
Joe,
you.
man. Um, I think I try every day to be open. For my whole life, I have defied being put in one box, right? I have this multi-hyphenate career. And yeah, I would say if there was one thing I wanted to be, it was open to possibility, to growth. I want to be someone that is constantly learning and constantly growing and never stops evolving or changing. Yeah, so if I had to put it down to one
Yeah.
thing, I would say open to change.
So in 10 years we talk, what are you going to want to tell me that's happened? You're on the cusp, you got this debut, lots of things are happening. What do you want to tell me in 10 years?
Like 10 more records and
Okay.
10 more great tours, and yeah, just making the music, making as much music as I can, and performing as much as I can. I never get tired of performing and singing and being in front of an audience. It's my favorite thing.
So the Sweetest Sounds is the debut album. If anybody wants to get a copy, Bandcamp, where's the best place?
Yeah, best place is on my website directly.
Okay.
I've got CD and vinyl available for pre-order, starting already, and then the record will be out for everyone on all streaming platforms all over the world on my birthday on April 3rd.
Okay, very cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
It's so good to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a
So
minute
great
out.
to
Best
meet
of
you
luck.
too,
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
so much.
yeah, you
Neon Jazz.